Awesome. So yeah, thank you for joining us today for the Argo 101 GitOps workshop. And for today's webinar, we're going to be doing a little bit of show and tell. We're going to show you what GitOps is. We're going to talk about why you should use GitOps. And then we're going to do a little bit of hands-on where we're going to be deploying an application, upgrading it, and then troubleshooting it using Argo CD. We're actually going to be showing you the complete journey, and that's going to include CI as well. And the way that I formulated this CI/CD lab today is going to be very accessible to everyone. So it doesn't require that you need your own environment or anything. The only prerequisites that you're going to be needing today is going to be a browser and a GitHub account. We're going to be using GitHub Actions with Argo CD. And then after we go over today's webinar and today's lab, we're going to have a little Q&A section in case you have any harder questions that you want to ask us. All right, and then we're going to do a quick intro. So why should you trust me for today's lab? Well, I am Daniel Hoang. I'm currently a developer advocate at Akuity, which is the enterprise company for Argo. If you don't know, it's a company that's actually started by the people that created Argo. You should also trust me because I'm a dog person. I was also previously a DevOps consultant. I was a sales engineer at Harness. And then I was also an SRE in my past life at Alchemy, where I actually worked putting out fires. Yeah, you can see right over here. These are my two dogs, Latte and Momo. So what is GitOps? Curious, what is everyone's here knowledge of Argo? We're gonna throw a poll up real quick. Just curious to know kind of in our audience what your familiarity is. Awesome. It looks like a crazy race so far. Yeah, so it looks like the knowledge is pretty spread out. I kind of expected that. We did target this as a 101 lab here, so hopefully you're able to learn something new today. All right, so GitOps is essentially it's an operational framework where we're going to essentially take best practices for DevOps and application development, things like version control, collaboration, compliance, CI/CD, and tooling, and how that applies to infrastructure. So GitOps is essentially whenever your desired software system is described by your files in Git. And since Argo is Kubernetes native, we're going to be using Kubernetes and we're going to be using Git. Whatever code or whatever files you have defined in Git is going to be what we expect to be deployed out into your Kubernetes. And that's declarative. And then you're also going to have an agent that ensures that the live system is in the same state as Git. So how we define this in GitOps is essentially a drift. And we're going to go much more in depth into detail on that once we get started. So this is a simple diagram that I put up real quick that's going to show you the relationship. So essentially, you're going to have your source code, your Git repository. And then in this example, the agent's going to be Argo CD. It's going to ensure that what is in your Git repository is running in your Kubernetes cluster. And then we're going to get into why you want to use GitOps. So GitOps it's a really great tool. It provides you a single source of truth. Since everything is recorded in Git already, you're able to understand, who made what specific changes, who pushed, new deployments into production. And that gives you that security, it gives you the compliance, and it gives you that auditing piece as well. It's a very developer-centric tool. Since developers are already accustomed to using Git, they can start using GitOps, very easy. It's very easy to pick up. It trivializes rollback. Whenever you want to do rollbacks, you can essentially just revert your previous commit. And that records that, that piece of information you're able to see, the auditing trail of who did that specific rollback, who committed a specific change. It's just very good for visibility. It's declarative. So whatever you have defined within Git is in your actual production cluster. You get lots of observability from using a deployment tool that's based off of Git as well. And it also improves velocity. So velocity is how often you're deploying. Whenever you're doing code change, that does a deployment. That ensures that you're operating at maximum peak velocity. And that's adjustable depending on how you want to set up your system as well. But whenever you're pushing out more code, it's much more stable and you're able to roll out features much quicker. So just a quick fun fact is that in the in the end of the year update on open source velocity in 2021, Argo is actually featured within the GitOps ecosystem as one of the highest velocity projects. Essentially, every single year, there's been over 115% more use in production for Argo. So it's very insane growth for a GitOps tool, essentially taking one of the top spots on the podium for all the CNCF tools in general. So some other tools that are useful in GitOps is going to be a manifest generation tool, something like Helm or Kustomize. It's very useful to be able to essentially, template various details like replica sets, ingress, and then essentially provide layers above that. What's also very useful to have is a CI system. So for today's lab, we're going to be using GitHub Actions, but essentially, every deployment is going to start with a commit. So within the CI system, you're going to essentially build an image, start a GitOps software delivery pipeline, and then have Argo detect that and deploy it out to production. And then a way to group Kubernetes resources. It's typically, it's very helpful to be able to group your Kubernetes resources, and there's multiple ways to do this. So for example, you can group it by cluster, by namespace, or even by label. And you want to do this because you need a way to be able to restrict access for specific teams, especially as you scale in size. And then real quick, if you don't know what Kustomize is yet, Kustomize is what we're going to be using in today's lab. And it essentially allows you to define a base directory that contains all the common definitions for the environments of your service. And then environment directories can inherit from that base directory. And you can essentially apply different changes based off of those specific environments. That way you can adjust those details like the replica sets, for example. It's really a neat way to be able to organize your deployments for your various environments and even various specific regions. So who uses Argo? Argo is actually used by tons of companies right now, ranging in multiple sizes from small companies to very large companies and across multiple types of industries as well, like fintech, healthcare, sports. Lots of people are using Argo essentially. There are lots of tools out there for GitOps. Tools like GitLab, Flux CD, Argo CD. But what's really important is with Argo CD specifically, one of the strong advantages is having the UI, which Argo CD provides. And it's a tool that's essentially really created by developers for developers. It's intended to surface out details with Kubernetes and help you learn how to use Kubernetes. So we've been talking about Argo CD a lot for the beginning of this webinar, but Argo is actually a collection of tools. So it's a collection of tools that allow you to run workflows, manage clusters, and essentially do GitOps right. There is Argo CD, which is the GitOps tool to do CD. Argo rollouts, which is a controller that allows you to utilize complex deployment strategies like blue-green deployments, canary deployments. There's Argo workflows, which is a workflow manager. And then there's also Argo events, which is an event dependency manager that allows you to essentially trigger based off of events as well. So there's a lot of tools that you can use individually, or you can use them together as well. So real quick, just want to throw up another poll. Does anyone know where the Argo name came from? Oh yeah, the Oscar-winning movie. It seems like you guys are, very knowledgeable in Greek mythology, but yeah, it did come from an Oscar-winning movie. No, no, it didn't. It definitely came from Greek mythology, and it's named after the ship called Argo. And an Argonaut, our octopus friend over there, happens to be a species of pelagic octopuses. So that's where the logo comes from, in case you were ever curious about the origin of that. So I'm going to do a quick walkthrough and demo of Argo CD before we get into the lab. That way, you're not completely lost as we're going through it. All right, so I have the UI of Argo CD pulled up, and Argo CD is, provides a very powerful dashboard and management plane. So two large concepts in Argo CD, you'll see that it's very simple. So one concept is the application. We're going to be creating an application today. And within the application, you can essentially define the source, essentially what you're going to deploy, which is going to be your Git repository and its path, and the destination where you're wanting to deploy it, which is going to be defined more as your cluster and your namespace. A project within Argo CD is the unit of tenancy. So within the Argo project, you can manage, who has access to specific clusters, to specific namespaces, Git repositories, and specific resources as well. For today's lab, we're going to be providing a webinar cluster for you to use, where I've used a little bit more lax permissions. You're not going to need to create your own cluster for this lab, but you can if you want to. You can always do that individually. Clicking into this application. So within an application, there's going to be two types of main statuses. Yeah, someone asked to increase the font size. Let me see if I can increase this real quick. Does that help? So yeah, continuing within this application, we essentially have two main statuses. One is going to be application health, and one is going to be your sync status. Think of the sync status as what your application's current state is when compared to your Git repository. Whenever you're doing a sync with GitOps, it's essentially doing a deployment. The application health is going to be referencing the overall health of your application. So within Argo CD, within this application view right here, it's going to surface all of your resources for Kubernetes. There's multiple views, but you can essentially click into each individual object of Kubernetes to find out more information about it. So we're going to do a sync or deployment real quick and synchronize this application. And it's going to deploy this out. Based off of the relationship, you can see that this application spawns a deployment. These are going to be the YAML that you define. Within this YAML, in your deployment, you're going to define your replica set, which spawns a pod. And you're able to see how the relationship tree connects all those resources together. You can click into each individual piece of Argo CD and find out more information. You can check the events, the logs, and even see a live manifest of what's currently running. Over on the top right, you're going to see that we have other views as well. Yes, Argo CD can be used to deploy Helm charts. So it's very flexible tooling, and we're going to get into that as we kick off the lab. So going into these other views right here, you can view based off of specific node groups. You can also view your network layer. So you can see how your application is exposed based off what information you've provided within your YAML already. You can also see a list view of your actual resources in case you prefer that. So with that said, I'd say that we're ready to actually start doing the actual lab. So if my team could share the link to the repository and the link to our webinar cluster in the chat, please. And for accessibility, I've also included within the notes for this repository full instruction slides. So you can open this and go through it at your own pace. It's going to show you step by step, click by click, what you need to do to accomplish this lab. It's going to help you learn how to use that. All right. So starting today, the prerequisites again are going to be a GitHub account and an Argo CD instance. So since we're attending the webinar today, we do already have an Argo CD instance. What you'll need to first do is fork this example repository. And if you're not going to be performing the lab today, I'm going to go ahead and do the lab on screen as well. That way, other people that are watching are able to get value from this as well. It's like we hit the double-digit forks already. It's kind of exciting. I think GitHub is trying to enter that social media space as well. Hopefully GitHub is going to be working good today. I know they weren't having the best month last month. All right. And then before we get into more of the lab, I'm going to show you how the CI portion of it works today. So this is very simplified. So the CI part of the process is essentially going to be working on building the image and then adjusting your deployment YAML for Argo CD to detect. We simplified this. This is all going to be done within the same repository. We're essentially going to have an environment version. This is going to define what version of the Nginx artifact that we're going to be using today. And then essentially in this next section right here, what we're basically saying is to ignore any changes that are done in our deployment YAML repositories, but anywhere else, if there is a change, go ahead and execute this job. And then within the job, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using Kustomize. So within this job, we're going to have Kustomize update your specific name prefix here. And then we're also going to have it update and then adjust the image to the latest version of Nginx that we're going to be applying within this GitHub Actions YAML. That's what's going to be happening from that perspective. So whenever we kick off that new job, it's going to go in and then create a commit within your environment. We're going to be deploying the staging environment today. So whenever you can, execute that GitHub Actions job, it's going to update your name prefix here and then update your specific tag here. This is a far simplified version. So whenever you're going to be using this in your own environment, what you'll want to eventually do is separate your deployment YAML into a separate repository and then create a new PR whenever your changes are occurring. That way you can have that additional layer of an approval layer, but also compliance and auditing so you can get better metrics as well. Yeah, let me increase the font size a little bit here. All right. If everyone is still with me, what we're going to do next is once we've cloned this repository, you'll want to click into actions within GitHub. That's where CI is going to be done for GitHub Actions. So when you open that up, since you just cloned my repository or forked my repository, you're going to have to enable GitHub Actions to be able to execute CI. Once that is done, we're going to navigate to the GitHub Actions CI steps. And then we're going to make a change. So we're going to adjust the environment version to 1.21.6. We'll start by hitting this edit button right here. Make the specific change, and then start the commit. Once you've done that commit, GitHub Actions is going to start your build. So you can click into Actions and then view your build getting run. And you're going to be able to see all the steps getting executed here. Oh, yeah, it looks like, oh no. How is everyone's progress currently? Is your GitHub Action step currently executing? You can verify if the action has completed by either going to the Actions tab and looking at that specific job, or you can click right into your staging environment customization and verifying that the name prefix has been updated to your username. So someone just asked how long Argo CD takes to detect the drift. So Argo CD pulls every 3 minutes, but you can set up a webhook to detect that change immediately after you commit a change. Yeah, so forking a repository essentially means that you're just making a copy of this repository into your own account. But if you if you hop onto the guide right here with the full instruction with walkthrough slides, it'll walk you through if you're completely new to this. All right, so once you verified that your staging environment has been updated, your CI process is completed, let's go ahead and we're going to open up the Argo CD UI. So if my team could share the link to the webinar URL again, we're going to open up this UI and then hit add new app. For the new application, we're going to go ahead and name this after your username for GitHub. Go ahead and use all lower cases for this. We're going to be using the default project that we have defined. For the sync policy, we're going to leave it manual for now. You can also set this to automatic to where this syncs to your repository automatically, but we're going to go ahead and leave this manual for the sake of the lab. Within the source, we're going to copy the repository URL and paste that right in. You're going to be using the one that you forked with your username here, of course. And then for the path, we're going to go ahead and select that staging environment. So that's going to be the source. This references the specific Git repository and the path that you want to deploy. The destination is going to be the cluster that we're going to deploy to. So this cluster I've already predefined within here. We're going to select it. And then we're all going to be deploying into the default namespace today. So Argo CD has already detected that we're using Kustomize, and it's pre-populated some details. But Argo does support multiple other types of configuration management tools as well, such as Helm. So once you filled out all those details, go ahead and create your application. Looks like a lot of applications are popping up already, but you can always use the top bar to search for yours in case you get lost. All right, and then once you have your application open, we can go ahead and hit sync to deploy your application. Give everyone a second to get on that. Awesome. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of troubleshooting. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to see exactly what a full CI/CD pipeline looks like and what it looks like whenever your application is out of sync. To do that, we're going to click back into the GitHub Actions CI steps. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and edit this file again, and we're going to update that environment version to 1.21.6. That's going to kick off a new CI build, and it's going to kick off these steps again and update our environment version within our Kustomize staging environment YAML. So I'm not going to do it specifically because I don't want to make any changes to my repository in case new people are hopping on and trying out this lab as well. But once you make that adjustment, GitHub Actions is going to detect that and then kick off your new CI job. So you should be able to click into Actions, verify that your job is running. You'll be able to see all the steps that are executing again. So you're going to see the checkout. It's going to check out your code. It's going to run your Kustomize commands, and it's going to update your Kustomize file. Oh yeah, actually, you should have updated it to the version that I had listed in the instructions here. Yeah, so someone just asked, is it possible to have gates and approvals for this deployment process? So essentially what you would want to do for the gates and approvals is you would want to eventually move your deployment YAML into a separate repository. That way, whenever your CI steps execute, you can instead create a pull request. That way, that pull request is going to act as that gate or that approval process before a deployment is done. But I'm going to go ahead and edit my version number to that version that I listed right here in the steps, 1.21.622. And then we're going to save that change. So based off of that new version that we're deploying, you're going to see that it's going to spin up a pod, and the pod looks and appears to be in an unhealthy state. With Argo CD, since everything bubbles up, you're going to see that once we detect an unhealthy pod, you're going to have a replica set that fails to get to a steady state. And then based off of that failure, it's going to bubble up to your deployment, which also fails to get to a healthy state. And then within your application health, you're going to see that it's unhealthy. So by essentially following that red trail, you're able to troubleshoot and determine what went wrong with your application. From here, you have multiple choices on how you want to roll that back. So you can either revert that change within Git. That way you have that history for compliance. Or also you might have a team that just wants to hop on and fix everything and then ensure that everything is good before you apply the actual real fix the next day. You can also use the Argo CD UI to be able to do that by clicking into history and rollback, going to your specific version that was working, and then rolling back to that. So that's an example of what it might look like to use Argo CD. Hopefully that was valuable. I've always wanted to see what a lot of applications look like in this view. So I want to go ahead and take a look at this summary view. So it looks like, there are some people that are doing this lab, and we're able to see, some applications that are currently out of sync, applications that are in sync as well. So it's very good visibility for when you're having to scale up to a lot of applications. So what happens when you do a rollback within the Argo CD UI is that Argo CD is essentially going to break the sync. So nothing changes in your Git repository. So what you will want to eventually do is actually commit what you want to roll back within your actual Git repository and re-enable that sync. But yeah, we're happy to help in the chat for anyone else that's working on the lab. But I also wanted to use any time for Q&A as well. So if you had any additional questions, our team is available. Our CEO, Hoang Wei, has joined the call as well. He's answering questions. We also have our solution architect, Nikita, available, and our marketing expert, Woltek. Yeah. If you have any other deeper questions, feel free to ask them on our Q&A or ask them in the chat, and we'll try our best to answer them. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. Yeah, bootstrapping with Argo is a great idea. Argo CD can manage itself. So we will be sending a survey after. Yeah, after we're also going to include the recording as well. But yeah, we would like to get some feedback on how the webinar was, what your experience was, and understand what would be helpful to learn in the next webinar. As for the webinar cluster, we're only going to be running that for the next couple of hours. So if you do, you're able to continue and test out the lab, but you'll have to spin up your own Argo CD instance. You can do that locally, or you can do that on your cloud provider.